Brian Tourville, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so we have a long history. We met in 2012 in Worcester, Massachusetts, somewhere around there.
I was in Worcester at the time. I don't know the name of the town now. It was further west of that.
Yeah, and we were just both randomly attending a permaculture design course.
That's right.
And I remember you had the facility with graphics, and you were able to plot out all the land and the orchard, and I think we were on the same team.
That's right.
And we kicked ass because because of your technical and design skills.
That's right. We used Photoshop too. Yeah.
And then here we are, and we live like a mile and a half apart.
Somehow.
That's
a strange one. I'm still figuring that one out.
Yeah. So anyway, you're here because you're one of the very interesting people that I've met in my life. We had a lot of conversations that stay with me. And you have a lot of interests in the natural world and design. And you came over the other day and showed me a thing you'd made. And it's not just a thing, but a pretty thing, but a useful calendar, but it's got a whole philosophy and ethos behind it.
Yeah.
And so, it'd be cool to sell a few of these to folks who are looking for interesting, commoditized gifts for people. But really, I want to talk to you about the philosophy and the outlook behind, a circular calendar and everything else. So, I don't know, where do you want to start? Just talk about, maybe just describe the calendar a little bit, and then we can get into what's behind it.
Yeah, sure. So it's called The Space of a Year, and it's meant to depict the entire year in a single image. I specifically wanted that because the common calendars that we use now, you only get to see a month at a time, typically. And it's not a great visualization tool, say at New Year's, to think okay, what is my year going to be? And you look at your calendar and you only see January. So its purpose is to be a tool for visualization so that you can sort of close your eyes and see where you are in the year and maybe remember specific things about the year that you want to that pertain to the time you're in. So I tried to make it as intuitive and accurate as possible, which is a very difficult thing because the way time works and the way the planet moves around the sun in relation to our calendar and the moons and everything is it's not very intuitive. There's a lot of figuring out that goes into it.
Right.
So
now we could have had a year calendar, on a space this big, there's 24 by 24. We could have put all the months, but there's something really interesting to me about the circularity of it, as opposed to when I look at a regular calendar, I think, okay, I can think of the year ahead. I can make plans and decide I want to be here by June and here by September for various projects or skills or hobbies or interests. But there's something really interesting about bringing it back up. Talk about why circular.
Well, the planet's orbit is circular, and that's what a year is based on. We didn't just arbitrarily choose let's make it 365 and a quarter days. It was well, what is nature doing? It's because the Earth completes a full rotation 365 and a quarter times before it finds its way back to the same location relative to the sun. We know that because the sun has the same path every year through the constellations. You can see, it's back in this constellation. So, it's circular because that's what nature did. That's just how things landed.
So I got to ask I suspect is a really dumb question, which is the constellations are configurations of stars, right?
Yeah.
And I can't see any stars when the sun is out.
Right.
So how do we know where the sun is in relation to the stars that it outshines?
it's very impressive that we ever got to know that before telescopes and all, all the kind of stuff. Basically, by tracking the stars throughout the entire year, you're going to see the same set of constellations one night to the next. You're going to see a slightly different set. I mean, just I don't remember how many degrees it is, but 1 month to the next, you're going to see, the complete opposite set 6 months from now. So people, started tracking it and paying attention and noticed that, one, it's running through the same ones every year, but that it repeats. So you can tell, just by timing, 6 months ago we could see these constellations, so those guys are behind the sun now. It's a pretty complex thing to figure out for humans, but we've known about it for a very long time. So,
and this works if you assume that the Earth is the center of the universe, right? Basically, because you said the sun goes on its path. Could we imagine we're in the center of a sphere? We're right in the center, and this all is happening around us.
Right. So that's the geocentric perspective. So that's what we see. That's not looking at it looking at the solar system and the sun and the Earth from above and going, oh yeah, I see it going around. You're instead saying, well, what do we see from here? So it wouldn't be right to say the center of the universe, but the center of our perspective. It's just based on observations from the point of the planet. So that's to clarify. That's kind of why we see the constellations in the sky when we do and where we do is they're not at all those shapes actually out there in space. It's just what it looks like from here. So
so I was trying to think, when I first saw it, it's you've superimposed this circular thing on it, but really this is where it started, right? This is the origins of calendars, of the cycle, that everything that we think of as a calendar is superimposed, right? My week at a glance calendar. Weeks are sort of human inventions, or the idea of progress or birthdays or quarterly planning cycles for projects. I think of that as the normal calendar. Yeah. But that really is a whole bunch of superimposition upon what we really have, which is just this repeating cycle.
Yeah. Well, so that would be like a human-centric calendar. Your dentist appointment doesn't care about what constellation the sun's in, so it's not meant for that purpose. It's meant for just sort of task management, I would say. So it makes sense to have the calendar like it is. It's just there's another way to look at it too, and I just hadn't seen it out there, so I said, well, I guess I gotta make it.
Right. So you wouldn't want this on your phone, right? To manage your appointments.
I don't know. One of the things I'm most curious about learning about getting this thing out there is how people use it, how people want to use it, what they see in it, and this whole thing right now is just my ideas, and I want it to be, I really want to see how people use it. Maybe you put your don't forget your dentist appointments this day. I don't know. It could be used for anything, It's just it's not going to be in your pocket, so.
Right, but it is intended to reconnect us with something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, initially it was just intended for me. I didn't ever really think it was going to be something I was going to share or put out there or bring to this level of completion. It was really, for permaculture, what I wanted was to have a sense of what to do when, what's in season. Specifically, it really was food-based for me. The reason I wanted to do this is I wanted to get closer to seasonal eating. Mm-hmm. So, if you can look at the calendar and say, we're in August here, out down here, I'm used to Massachusetts, you know, like tomatoes are going bananas. So you could like draw in like tomatoes are from here to here, you know, just so that if you spend enough time with it, and instead of thinking an abstract concept of August in your mind, you can actually see where that happens in the year. And I feel like it will allow people to have a more, or develop it over time, a more intuitive sense of what nature's up to at any given time. I mean, it's kind of like the clock on the wall, you know, you can kind of glance at it and go, oh, it's, you know, whatever time, and you don't need to really imagine like, oh, it's 6:30. You know, it's like you got it.
It's almost like a clock on the wall at a space station where like there's no time. Like, oh, okay, now we know it's 6:30, but it's not in relation to anything meaningful, right? For us, August. Okay, well, maybe we'll take a couple weeks off, go to the beach, but I can get blueberries in August. I can get blueberries in December. I can get watermelon in November. That this is reminding us that they're like, you know, 200 years ago, people wouldn't have had to like go, gee, I wonder what, you know, I'm going to try eating seasonally.
Yeah, no, you had no option. That's all there was.
So why is that important? What are we missing when we live just in human-centric linear time?
Well, I can't speak to anybody else. You know, I know for me, for food purposes, I mean, fresh local food is just nutritionally superior to something that got shipped over from New Zealand out of season, or just pick your place, you know, like that. For me, it was like for health. But I do think there's science is kind of, and this is nothing against science, but it's kind of destroyed the sort of cosmological aspect of mythology for us. You know, like a lot of religions have a cosmological component where they talk about, you know, how the universe was made and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's an important part of our lives that we've forgotten about in a way, because science came in and kind of said, you know, look, your model of the universe isn't right. So they kind of just tossed it, but nothing ever really came in to replace it in our personal lives, where, you know, most people have a religion or something that they would use to relate to the cosmos. And since science has kind of cracked up those views, it's been gone. And I don't know why or how, but I think it's something that matters to us, even if we don't know it. And I might be wrong about that. That's the sort of supposition that I've been under, is like...
Well, so what would an example of a cosmological view of the universe be? Like a Native American story about, you know, Raven steals the fire, and that's what, or you know, the trees all want to cover up the little ones in the fall, like a story of sort of purpose and agency within nature.
I think those stories still work because they're performing a different function. I mean, what I'm speaking of is like, I'll just pick Christianity because it's the one that I grew up with. You know, their notion of the early on, you know, the earth being the center of the universe, and beyond the clouds is the firmament, and there's heaven, and, you know, the sort of concept of like, oh, those stars up there are just sort of holes in the blanket. You know what I mean? That's covering, and like, I mean, that's all been kind of proven wrong, but for a big part of human history, that was part of people's faith, and it helped connect them to something larger. And
in other words, so there is God who has made all this and has, you know, tucked us in with the blanket, and the stars are little holes in it that are beautiful, but that everything was for us, and everything made sense.
Yeah.
And now we have a science-based cosmology that says everything is random particles, and 90% of it is dark matter, and
yeah, it's a very much stranger situation than we imagined, for sure. and I don't think there's any good way for us to relate to that personally. At least in terms of any kind of institutional, like, here's how it is, and here's how you relate to it, and here's, so you can at least just check it off your list and go on with your day, and I think it might be, a small piece, but it might be a sort of piece of the puzzle that we're missing in modern life. That, we got nothing to lose by trying to find out, like, does it help to relate to a larger sense of time? To find your way to tie back to the rhythms of nature within yourself. Maybe. It's been that way for me. It's helped me.
Right. We certainly, I don't know that we can do a causal relationship, but we can see what has happened as we have gotten more science-based in our understanding of the world, that we've depersonalized it, and we treat Mother Earth as an endless stockpile of commodities to be mined or pumped or bulldozed. And so, arguably, like, if when I read about sort of native peoples' cultures and their beliefs about, like, you wouldn't do that. Like, you wouldn't do that to your mother.
Right, yeah.
Right, you wouldn't do that to your grandfathers and grandmothers. And so then maybe there's, sort of reorienting us towards our place in things can help us treat them better.
That is the word that I would use for this, is orientation. That's the sort of primary goal of this, is to have a sense of orientation, in a very mysterious world. That's kind of how this thing was born, was, as I grew up as a young man, I had a lot of questions, and began to really question, like, what is going on here? Like, what is what's this all about? And the more I looked, the more I started to realize, like, well, it's a pretty big mystery here, the whole thing that's going on. And, like, how do you find your way to get grounded in that? Like, how do you, like, if you're lost in the woods, like, you got to start somewhere. Like, okay, which way's what? And that's kind of what this is intended as, and that's part of what drove it for me, was so that I could have a sense in my mind of, like, where we are, and maybe what to do with it.
So an orientation in time, as opposed to, like, a compass would give you an orientation in space.
Well, in space too, as far as I can tell, most of the things we know are just strictly relative. Like, space, for example, like, we know where we are relative to the sun. We know where that is relative to the center of the galaxy, for example. We know roughly where that is based on other galaxies. We know that's in the universe, whatever that is. Beyond that is anybody's guess, and that's one of the questions early on for me that I was trying to wrap my head around, is like, where the hell are we? And the fact is, nobody really knows, and that's part of why I wanted to sort of get back to the fundamentals and say, okay, what do we know? We know we're on this planet, moving around this sun. What's it doing? What's it up to? How's it all work? And at least have a starting point for me to have something that resembles an answer, So, it's moderately succeeds in that.
All right, well, let's look at it, and I think we have some slides that I can interstice. Is that a word?
It is now.
Yeah, interstitial eyes. So maybe you can take us through. So I see there's the months, starting with January, ending with December. I noticed that January 1st doesn't start at the top.
No.
So these are not random things. These are decisions that had to be made. Describe what we're looking at.
Okay, so we'll start from the center. We're showing the sun, and it has the year 2020 in it, because this only applies to the year 2020 because the days change. It's a leap year, so it actually is 366 days. So next year when I go to update it, I'm going to have to redo all the days again. That's very, very tedious. So anyway, the sun's in the middle, and around it I've shown, 8 moons. 8 Earths. So if we start from the top, the winter solstice is the point that the axis of the Earth is facing basically directly north. That's why it's the longest day of the year for people in the northern hemisphere, because we're furthest away from the sun up here. And as you travel through the months, you're an eighth of the way through the year at this point. The Gaelics, I believe, are the ones that named it Imbolc, which I have only read it, so I don't even know if I'm saying it right.
Uh-huh. I'm sure we'll get comments if you're not.
Yeah, well, I welcome them because this has been a lot of work to try to check this all myself. So eighth of the way through the year, you got that, and a quarter of the way is the equinox, where, again, in the northern hemisphere, well, this one actually applies to both hemispheres. The day is equally as long as the night, and that's because of geometrically, that's just how it works. Then you go to Beltane, which is the next one. I'm not going to try to get into fractions here, mainly because I'm not good at them. So halfway through, you have the summer solstice, which is the opposite. The northern hemisphere is now tilted towards the sun, so it's getting a whole lot more daylight, a whole lot more heat. That's why it's summer. Still have no idea
I'm gonna go
what that word is.
I'm going to go with Lunasa.
I like it. That works. That's the next one. Next eighth marker. Equinox, same situation, except you're just now on the opposite side of the sun, where the axis is equal. Equinox actually, I think, means equal night in Latin, which is just saying, exactly that. Samhain,
which I believe is Samhain.
Might be, yeah. See, this is a problem with reading stuff only. Which people usually associate with Halloween because it's Halloween landed right there. And then the solstice, so you're back to the beginning of the year. Well, the end of that year and the beginning of the next.
Okay, you've also got a bunch of moons here.
Yeah.
And you have some moon signifiers up at the top of the circle.
Yeah, so I visited a number of websites to get the names of the moons, and there's a bunch of disagreements, that might be a new word too. What they're called, so I don't even remember how I chose. I was just like, well, you win. So, people might look at it and go, that's not the hunter's moon, that's the something or other moon. And yeah, it is.
Well, what I like about the name, it will just read like cold moon, wolf moon, snow moon, worm moon, pink moon, flower, strawberry, thunder, sturgeon, harvest, hunters, blue, and beaver. They're evocative. Like when you say beaver moon, you can see something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
an association. That's one of the main goals of this, is I want you to be able to associate a sense of time with, like to be able to tie in right now or, sometime in the future or past with other contexts. I don't feel like our calendars right now do that. So, and actually, a pretty neat side note, the blue moon is named that because it is a blue moon, which is when there's 2 full moons in the same month, and you can actually see, where are we here? By the month lines, that there was a full moon at the beginning and the end of the month. So,
okay. So it's not actually blue, like in the sky. It's just called a blue moon, like a rare occurrence.
I don't know why they chose that name, but it looks the same.
Okay, gotcha. I now have the song in my head.
And I'd only put these ones out where the days are out at the end so that you wouldn't have to try to figure out, like, okay, where does that line up? I just kind of threw that in there for people so they'd know. And if you want to just continue working out from the center, we have the constellations, which, as we discussed earlier, depict where the sun is in space.
Okay, I'm just checking because at 29 minutes it obnoxiously turns itself off, so I'm just keeping a little eye.
Fair enough. Oh yeah, so these just represent where the sun, what constellation the sun is in during that day of the month. So you can see, I mean, if you know your birthday, you can always look and go, oh yeah, there it is, you know, that's me. Beyond that, I have just a little bit of a sort of artistic flair that I wanted to throw in there to, you know, give it that sort of mandala type look. But it also shows, you know, the month and the weeks. And then you get out to the portion that is meant to be written on, which is one of the main things I've been harping on people about. It's just, you got to write on it. That's what it's for. You know?
People should not buy the expensive glass-covered calendars.
No. You should wreck this thing by the end of the year with ink and highlighters and crayons and whatever you want to do. Like, just make it yours, you know. So yeah, and you can see there are 366 lines all the way around, and each space is a day. These yellow lines are the weekends, which I thought should be a little brighter because
why not?
My weekends are brighter for me. You know, and then out here we have the days, so you can see, you know, what day you're in, and I put the weeks in there, and just, I wasn't actually going to include them. They were just in there from the previous version, and I didn't feel like deleting them. So, and I've actually shown the constellations in white here too, just for kicks. Just I thought it would be neat that people would like that.
All right, and you'd mentioned to me that there's elements of what you call sacred geometry, and maybe we'll hit the thing and restart it.
Sure, yeah.
Hang on, everybody. And we're back. So sacred geometry. What is it, and where do we find it in the calendar?
That is that's what the background is based on, and I do have a slide for that too, so you can kind of really see what it is. It's just a side passion of mine. It's just something I'm interested in, I think is fun, and I like playing around with it. And,
what is it? What is it?
Oh boy, I wouldn't even know how to describe it. I don't know. That's a good idea that I try.
Okay. People go look it up. Sacred geometry.
Yeah. I
mean, is it like? It sounds like is it a religious thing, or?
I want to say the Egyptians came up with it like forever ago. It could be a religious thing. Sure. I mean, it's. I don't see it that way. I actually don't even like that the word sacred is attached to it, but I understand why it is. It's just very, very fundamental geometry. It's pretty. Okay. If you want to talk about that,
is it like sort of, you know, the golden ratio, like the idea that there are, you know, like we live in a kind of a post-truth world where everything is relative, and yet mathematics. A lot of people say like mathematics has truth,
yeah,
or that, you know, that you can see these. You know, mathematical or geometrical patterns as being sort of the building blocks of reality, and that if you get to know them, you can, just like when you get to know your when your pumpkins are in season and where the moon is, that you can be at home in a universe where you understand how to make it, sort of.
Yeah. Understand somewhat what it's made of, I would say. Okay. I wouldn't know where to start. Actually, yeah, I mean that's how it starts. Actually, is it starts from a point, then it makes a line, it rotates that line around a point, and that's like, you know, it's just slowly how you get a circle. You know, it's just. Look it up online. Okay. I'm not prepared to really talk about that. It is something I love though, and I have really, really enjoyed, and it's really something you should see, and you can see one version of something that relates to it here. But I mean, if you look up things like the Flower of Life or Metatron's Cube is a good one. I would say Sacred Geometry and Platonic Solids. If you look up that, you'll see it's some pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay. And you mentioned that there's sort of a fractal thing going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is the idea of sort of self-similarity, which you can see like really clearly here, but also you see it in like a lot of nature.
Yeah, I partially put that in here because I didn't want it to just be white or black. It was like something's got to go there. But yeah, nature uses these patterns quite a bit. I mean, the reason I have the honeycomb in here, I mean, honeycomb is basically the most efficient tessellation pattern you can have, two-dimensional pattern for circles there is. I mean, you can put a circle inside every one of those hexagons, and that's as tight of a circle as you can get, which is neat that the bees found that, It's like they just figured it out on their own. But to get to that, I followed with the hexagons up here, and those, I mean, each one of those essentially is a fractal. I mean, I didn't actually follow it through and zoom in a bazillion times and keep making them. It's for this practically.
Right. It's sort of like
it's a fractal.
It's like the funhouse mirrors, right, where the two reflecting back and forth. You can see yourself forever.
Yeah. There's a lot of holographic aspects to nature. DNA is a good example.
That the part contains the whole.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's DNA. It's a perfect example of that. And as I was speaking of earlier about trying to understand our place in the universe, I mean, there's a good shot that the whole thing's holographic in itself, and that's getting pretty out there. But I mean, it's as good a guess as any. In my opinion.
I mean, there's serious scientists who think that's the most likely thing, right?
Yeah.
This isn't just pipe dreams.
Yeah, and in that sense, if you follow that idea through, that would make time itself nonlinear. So, I mean, it would be just a continuous,
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the other thing is you mentioned, like here, I don't know if people can see 1, 2, 3 up through 12, that what this looks like is a watch face.
Yeah.
Like not a digital one. And one of the things I remember reading from some designer was like if you have a digital watch, each of the elements of the time, you have to kind of chunk it all together. So like 4:23, the 4 might have 4 lines on it, and then the 2 dots, and like so many pieces of information, as opposed to a watch face that says 4:23. You get it much more intuitive,
yeah.
And like this is like a watch for the year.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and it's more faithful to the reality of the situation than our sort of linear box calendars. This is much more representative of what is actually happening. So,
cool. Is there anything else you wanted to point out?
I had a fun notion that I really like, that I kind of want to just share, to sort of maybe help people reinvent their relationship to space, I guess. It sounds real silly, and it probably is, but it's really fun, and if you can do it, it's very rewarding in my opinion. And maybe, if people are interested in this, they might find themselves interested in trying this out. It's so when I was a kid, I used to do this thing when I'd be laying in bed. I'd be laying there with my eyes closed, and I'd try to trick myself into thinking I was laying the opposite direction in the bed.
Okay.
I don't know. I was a weird little dude. Not much has changed.
I think a lot of people will have something like that that they've never told anyone. Like
no, that's not.
Yeah, I remember laying
anything.
in bed and like playing with the idea like I was huge,
Yeah.
And I was like I could touch the walls, and like I was like a too big doll in a too small dollhouse. So,
and you were able to sort of get the sensation within yourself of really feeling like that was the case?
Yeah.
Perfect. That's the trick. If you can do that trick, you can do this one. And it's really fun, and I'll just get into it. It's winter now, so maybe this isn't a wintertime activity, but you just go outside on a clear night. I mean, moon or no moon, doesn't matter. Just a nice clear night. Put down a blanket, lay down on your back, and look up at space. So just that sentence alone is kind of a lie. Look up at space, because that's not really what's happening. You're looking out, you know. So the trick is to trick your mind into thinking you're looking down, and that you are stuck by some unseen force to this object behind you, and you're looking down, and at any moment you could just fall into it.
This is very Ender's Game.
Yeah, the enemy's gate. Yeah, I guess so. But so this is a really good way to trick your brain into seeing what actually is. You know, because right now it's a false sense of like up. I mean, that's a relative term to us, but it's not factually true. I mean, it is factually true. The definition is up is our sense of up.
Right,
but that's not a universal.
Away from the center of the earth.
Right, yeah.
But that's again, earth-centric.
Right. I mean, it's also down. It's also out. I mean, if you can get it to where you look like, it feels like you could fall into space, you can also feel like you're on the side of the thing. You know, and that you're looking out the side into space. And if you can really get your mind to do it, it's a worthwhile experience. I don't know.
Yeah, so I was imagining like God trips and pulls out the gravity electrical plug, and like, whoop, everybody slides off.
Yeah, and you can actually trick yourself into almost being fearful of that. You know, like you can almost feel like, whoa, like if this thing lets go, I'm gonna go flying. You know, it's
just like a space movie.
Yeah. And I know it sounds like a crazy thing to do, but it's a worthwhile experience.
Can you tease us as to what we might get, or just encourage us just to go do it and see for ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it doesn't work, and maybe it does, and if it does, maybe you go, okay, whatever, you know, and maybe you just think, wow, that was neat. You know, it's just, to me, it's a good way to remind yourself that perception is not always reality, and that things are more mysterious than we know,
right,
or tend to pay attention to, I would say.
Right. What it brings me to, and I want to be a little bit careful about speaking of this, but you and I have had discussions about certain friends from the mushroom community.
Yeah.
That can help us sort of see from perspectives other than our own little narrow ones. Right. It almost feels like this is a way to let go of the idea that my perspective, that what's coming out of these eyes, is the center of the universe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's to shake your thinking a little bit and shake your suppositions out of their containers and sort of reevaluate a little bit from a different angle. Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard there's other ways too.
Cool. So let's wrap up. Tell us where we can find this. And
so right now it's available for sale on thespaceofayear.artspan.com.
Okay.
And I'm still trying to figure out ways to drive the price down, because it's custom color print. You know, I don't have the economy of scale working for me right now. It's print on demand, so that's kind of hurting it right now. But I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right, you need a corporate sponsor. Someone will put their logo and give them out to all their clients.
Yeah, I'm sure people are chomping at the bit in the corporate world for this thing.
Right.
So it's the Space of the Year
The space of...
I'm sorry, The Space of a Year on Facebook. There's a page. I'm pretty new at all this, so and it's The Space of the Year on Twitter and Instagram as well. So
so the space of a year.artspan.com.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
people can go take a look, and don't get the one with the glass.
Do not get glass.
You might not even want to frame it. You might just want to get it in a roll and just scotch tape it up. And so, you know, the nicer you frame it and it looks, like the less likely you are to scribble all over it, which is your point. Like
it becomes a static piece. It's supposed to be dynamic. You're supposed to pour yourself into it. And even if it's on a wall, it's less likely, you know. So it's, I mean, people can do what they want, of course, but I would say have it accessible and be willing to scribble all over it, you know. And I would say too, make just as a suggestion, I have this text white because I wanted people to be able to take a highlighter and whoosh, January's over, you know, whoosh, February's over, you know. I mean, it's meant to be lived like a year, you know. You're gonna break some stuff, and not everything's gonna go right. Just go ahead and go make mistakes on it. It's fine.
Awesome. Well, thank you for. I mean, I know I have a sense. I don't know. I have a sense of the amount of hours, hundreds or thousands, that have gone into this. We were talking about this years ago. I think.
Yeah.
You were conceptualizing this, and it's finally here. And if you know, I'm talking to you guys now. If you are interested, Brian's a good guy. You're not going to get rich on this. This is,
no.
Unless you all make it happen.
I'm pretty sure I'm not.
But this is a labor of love.
Yeah.
And
it was made for myself, and then I started realizing, like, all right, other people might like this, so I gotta put some color on it and get it out there.
And to be in conversation with people. Like, what does it mean to see a year like this? To embed ourselves in cycles of nature, in the world that we so often convince ourselves isn't relevant.
Yeah.
So
I think we have a very narrow sort of time focus in our culture now. Like, people kind of have the blinders on. Like, this week, sometimes it's this minute to minute, and it's like, doesn't hurt to every now and then take sort of a deep breath a little bit and kind of widen your scope a bit and just check in with that.
All right. Well, when you come up with like a 1,000-year calendar, we'll talk about it again.
We're gonna need a bigger wall.
All right, Brian, thanks so much for doing this and for talking with us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.